moral anti-realism is a denial of moral properties, right?
It's usually taken to be that.
What is a moral property?
Well, just, goodness or evil, something.
Well, please excuse my ignorance, but isn't a property something that exists because something else exists?
Yeah, it's something that you predicate of something. So you could say it's a good action or a good person or a good state of affairs or good principle. I mean, I imagine there's a variety of things you could predicate goodness or badness.
Is it also true? I'm literally taking notes. Is it also true that to be a moral anti-realist means I'm going to go on a limb here, no universals?
No, I think you could be an anti-realist but deny universals.
Yeah, that's what I was implying, that an anti-realist would, here's my question, is it the case that an anti-realist would deny universals?
Sorry, they don't. I don't think they have to. They could affirm that there are universals, but still be an anti-realist.
I wonder how that would be possible. Um, would they also, because what I'm doing here is in my notes, I'm trying to understand, because you guys are talking about it, I'm going to get my notes open and stuff. So, I have I have two definitions of it that I've gotten from before, and I'm trying to understand what's the right way to say this? How do I say this? What is the uh, context in which anti-realism exists? And what I mean by that kind of a question is, does it necessitate no God can exist?
Well, if you take it that it's part of the concept of God, that if he were to exist, he would be a morally good being or something like that. Then yeah, if you were an anti-realist, that would commit you to uh, denying that God exists.
So I found the word I'm looking for, the conditions. So the conditions for moral anti-realism would have to be, well, I'm assuming no God, and how about this? Actions. Would that be
I,
correct?
I don't think you could say no God. Maybe no Judeo-Christian God.
No
I only
God
know
that was
Trinitarian.
defined. Sorry, no God that was defined as uh, a good being or something like that.
So do the conditions that allow moral anti-realism to I don't want to say risk being true. I'm not trying to be demeaning, but to the possibility of being true. No God, not we go with particulars out, and it would have to have actions because a rock is not morally good or bad. Isn't it an action that is good or bad? I don't mean a rock rolling, but me slapping you, you slapping me, an action morally good. Would that be the necessary precondition for the validity of moral anti-realism?
That actions existed.
Yeah, it would seem like that, right?
I don't think so.
I mean, if you see if it, let's say it was a true proposition that torturing a baby for pleasure is always wrong. it seems like that proposition could be true even if there were no people or no, no agents, anything like that.
Well, then, wouldn't that mean that, and please excuse me if I overstep you, I'm not trying to, would it not also mean, oh crap, I just thought, oh well, I thought I lost it. No, I forgot it. Repeat what you said. Let's see.
What I said is that if the proposition that torturing a baby for fun is always wrong is true, it doesn't depend on there actually being any agents who could torture any children for fun. Like that would be like I would take it that most moral realists would say the proposition could be true with or without the existence of any people, or
Right.
any agents.
Daniel is
Okay, now
trying
I remember. So you said torturing babies is wrong, could be true. And I asked if do we need, and I'll use your word, agents, perform an action. So if no agents are there to act, and yet something can still be true, then doesn't that imply that there's an inherent quality to a potential action?
You could say that. You could say that if that action were to occur, it would, it would be a property of that action, whether it was a good or a bad action, right? I mean, there's going to be metaphysical views that are going to try to say that moral realism doesn't commit you to the existence of properties, or like any moral fact being true doesn't commit you to there being moral properties.
But
But
wasn't Matt asking the opposite before?
he was asking whether if you were an anti-realist, it would commit you to denying universals.
Well, and then I thought he added also that it necessitates action existing to be a moral anti-realist, and I don't see why, if that's what he was saying.
Yeah, I was saying if there were an action, it could be a good action or a bad action. But that doesn't mean that there are any actions.
How's an action good or bad by nature? If anti-realism, if moral anti-realism is true, how could there be inherent moral value in any action?
No, the anti-realist would be denying that there's any moral value inherent in any action.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I was looking at the conditions or preconditions that make moral anti-realism possible. So I was I'm thinking out loud. I would list them. I would assume, and this I think is worth ferreting out a little bit more. No God. The implication to me seemed to say no universals. And then I asked about actions. Is there an inherent value in actions? And then I even got into the issue of intentions, which I want to get into too.
Why are you saying no actions?
I think we're just confused in what we're saying here. I was responding to what Jack was saying. Maybe we're just not on the same wavelength there a little bit. So I'm analyzing this right now, just because you guys are talking about it. Open up my notes. I'm going to start writing. And so my question is, what are the preconditions that make moral anti-realism either true or possibly true? Because moral anti-realism, moral anti-realism can't exist, I would think, by itself. It has to exist inside of a broader context. A person's desires, awareness. A rock, I don't see that the question is the rock moral? No, it's just a rock. It has no moral value to it, no moral property. An action would be moral, but the actions have to do with intentionality as well. But then we get into universals, universal intentions. Fuse how all this fits together, and what are the necessary preconditions by which moral anti-realism can be justified as a rational possibility. So I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, but so I think we, at least I understand the God, a specific type of God would be contradictory to having a moral anti-realist view. So I can understand that as being a precondition, but the rest I haven't followed.
Okay, what was he say about God? Oh, I didn't hear it. My hearing is not that good. Sorry.
The precondition that a Judeo-Christian God or a God that is good can't exist in order for moral anti-realism to be correct, the correct view. And you were saying phrases like a precondition for moral anti-realism to exist, but I don't know that that's how we would talk about it. We wouldn't say moral anti-realism exists. We would say the interpretation of the world as not having certain properties is true. So a precondition for that is that there is no Judeo-Christian type God or God that is defined as good. That's a true condition? What are the other conditions that you're positing?
No, I'm positing what the moral anti-realist would have to say. And by just asking the questions, I don't think he really thought it through. I haven't. I don't know of anybody. I just ask it. You have to have someone who thinks it, for one thing. You have to have consciousness.
So I think there we're sort of not just communicating well. I don't think the argument for moral anti-realism is an argument that something exists that has to have intention of moral anti-realism. It's saying that the world doesn't come with certain types of properties.
Isn't that an intellectual position, that the world does not have certain moral properties?
Yeah, the intellectual position for it to exist requires an agent, but that's not the same thing as the claim being true requiring an agent, right? Those are two different
Yeah,
types of arguments.
kind of. But doesn't that definition of moral anti-realism also necessitate universals? The very definition of it means that there has to be universal truth values by which I can understand what you're saying, and vice versa, by which you can apply it to all others. Doesn't that imply universals in that sense?
When you say it applies universals, you're saying there has to be something for your. If I understand, I'm just going to try to paraphrase what you're saying because I'm not sure I understood it. You're saying something like, for moral anti-realism to be correct, there has to be a notion of correctness.
Kind of. Let's see if I can word it better. Let's see. Definition of moral anti-realism. Okay, so there's no actual moral properties extant in the universe. All right. Doesn't that necessitate the universal of knowledge regarding that very concept? And in order to even state the proposition, doesn't it imply a kind of universal to even have that knowledge to even say what it is?
I'm just not understanding what you mean by universal to say what it is. Maybe if you can just dumb it
Sure.
down
A
a little bit.
universal. Sure. Universal chair. There's chairs as a universal, and there's particular manifestations or occurrences of that. And then how do they relate? Universals to the particulars, the one and the many issue. But in order to even have that discussion, it implies already an extant set of universals that we can share across internet and locations and stuff in different minds, so that we can have a common understanding and common knowledge by which we can then discuss it. So in light of that idea, I'm asking, doesn't the very definition of moral anti-realism, which is a conceptual thing, doesn't that necessitate the universal truth of certain realms of knowledge in order to have that the ability to state the proposition of what it is? I'm not wording it properly. I got to work on it.
I might have an intuition about what you're talking about, but so look, for example, for me to say, are you saying that for me to say a chair is in this room requires there to be a universal of chair?
Well, yes and no, depending. Uh, I'm a Trinitarian. I believe it solves a problem, but of one and many. But I'm just trying to ask, inside, kind of reset here, inside the, uh, I would say worldview, but the position or the proposition that there is no moral values, so anti-realism, no moral properties uh, related to the world. So then, what must be in place for that proposition to have truth value? Because it's a statement, it's an assertion. So if it's going to have a truth value, it can't exist independent of other facts and other actualities. So for example, it has to exist, so to speak, in my mind, in your mind. We have to be able to talk about it. Well, doesn't that then necessitate particular manifestations of the concept of moral anti-realism? But doesn't that kind of necessitate that there's a behind-the-scenes abstract principle that was known there, thereby necessitating the idea of universals, to which it seems moral anti-realism seems to stand in contradiction, if that makes sense.
I don't think it makes sense to me. It doesn't mean you're wrong. I'm not really following the argument because I think we could talk about the world and make claims about existence of things in the world, right? Um, with the understanding that the conversation and the dialogue depends on agent, but not that the claim's truth value depends on agent.
Yeah, I don't believe truth value depends on agents in all things, but it does in some. There's relative truths. Like I am married to my wife and prefer her over every other woman is a value that I have. And that wouldn't be true of you. But I'm kind of rambling out loud thinking about what you're saying. It's like you said it, and I liked it. You said intuit, you can intuit, so to speak. So I do the same thing. But it seems to me that there needs to be some form of universals that must be in place in order for the conversation about the propositions can even have any meaning.
I don't. So I mean, I prescribe to sort of a family resemblance view of concepts to begin with. So it's not clear that that's relevant, but it seems like you're talking about whether a concept must be substantiated in some kind of universal. So, for example, about chairness, I don't think there's a God-given category of chairness or a world comes up with a predefined category of chairness, nor do I think there is a fact of the matter of what is a chair and what is not a chair. We work under family resemblance and we make progress and have conversations about things that way. I'm not sure it's fully relevant, but it seems like it might be related to what you're talking about. But maybe Jack.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But I think even the denial of it presupposes it. Universality. Otherwise, we have universal, so to speak, particular manifestations of certain concepts, which, if they're not interconnected, how then we could justify them as being coherent across different minds? We're getting off track. But anyway, so the preconditions for moral anti-realism must be things like, you'd say no Trinitarian God in particular, which I think is interesting. What else? I would say that there should be at least some form of universals, so we can have commonality of speech and concepts that we can compare and use logic in order to process, right?
No, well, I'm having a hard time understanding that because in my perspective, it exists, or a property exists in the world independent of humans, right? It does or it does not exist independent of humans' existence. There could be properties that exist or don't exist, and asking the question, does it exist, doesn't mean that it inherently does exist, right? Or that you need human agents to exist for it to exist. I mean, we could,
Well,
if we sorry, go on.
but no, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, if we came up with some abstract object, right? If I said to you, hey, this object X exists, and you said, well, prove it to me that it exists, I could follow the same argument that you're following here, right? I could say, well, it must exist for it not to exist. It requires agents. For us to even talk about it, it requires agents or universals. And so to reject it would be to contradict the existence of universals, and therefore X exists. Meaning, if we take that pattern, we could bring anything into existence. So maybe let's not take moral properties. Let's just say X. Does X exist? Right. So this X happens to contradict, I don't know if it's specifically a Trinitarian God, but a God that's defined as good, because the notion of defining something as good implies that there's some standard independent of humans or that God that is good. So I think there is that is a prerequisite that that type of God can't exist and moral anti-realism be true. But I don't see the rest of it, right? So if we just talk about it more abstractly, like property X, does property X exist? Do you think for any property X, your claims are true about universals, regardless of what the
I don't
property
know.
is?
I don't know. I would tend to say yes, but with
Hmm.
reservations because if someone knows something and I don't, I go, oh, that's a good point. But I don't know. I have another question though. Um, so I'm mapping them out. I'm looking at my outline. Preconditions for moral anti-realism uh, as a truth value. Okay, as a true proposition. All right. So no Trinitarian God, which I think is really interesting. I really. Uh, so universals have to exist, otherwise we couldn't even have a conversation about propositions, for example, or what moral anti-realism is. Otherwise, we don't have any meaning to things. So one in the many problem. We can get that out some more. And I was talking to Jackie. He said, and I was saying actions. Would you agree that an action is necessary for a necessary precondition for anti-moral realism?
No, I would not. I think it's the opposite. Actions are required for moral realism. I assume. I guess not. I don't even think that. No, I don't think the existence of actions is an explicit requirement. Well, I mean, I should take a step back. There's a chance, depending on what we mean by actions, that I think it is necessary for the notion of actions to exist, for any world to exist. But I don't think that there's some specific relationship to moral anti-realism.
Doesn't moral anti-realism mean that there must be some understanding of what morals are in order to say they're not there?
I don't view it that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that there has to be an understanding. Again, it's like if I say X, property X doesn't exist, regardless of what it is, right? Obviously, I have to have an idea of some kind of what someone might be referring to when they say property X. The fact that I have an idea of property X doesn't mean it exists, nor does it mean that for it not to exist, actions would have to be there.
I would think that to deny that moral properties exist means that moral properties must be defined in order to say, hey, no, they don't. Those things over there don't exist. Because if you don't define it, how can you say they don't exist?
To have a discussion requires a definition. The existence is independent of the discussion, right? We could never have had the discussion and they could still not exist, right?
I don't know.
We, well, let's. Is there something you believe doesn't exist?
Square, cir-
Say that again.
square circles don't exist.
So, do agents need to exist for square circles not to exist?
Because related. Circle is a logical impossibility. Whether an agent exists or not is immaterial to whether or not it's possible. The possibility of it necessitates universals to begin with. A square and a circle must be universally known. And then they have to be contrasted to show that the law of non-contradiction, they can't both be true. That one is the other. It doesn't work. It violates the law of identity. So I don't see any issue there. But to deny that moral properties exist, to me, seems to mean that you know what it is you're saying doesn't exist. if we're having a discussion about it, and I'm a Trinitarian, and you know, I don't know if you're a moral anti-realist. I don't know if you're just stepping in to talk about it. I don't know. But if I were to say it's always wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure, and if you were to say there's no truth value to the statement, then morally wrong, or the issue of wrongness, has to be understood in relationship to it. Otherwise, if you're just saying, just nothing there, I'm thinking skepticism, because you can't have knowledge of what these moral properties might be. You're just denying them, but don't even know what they are. I just don't see it as being coherent. Maybe I'm just missing something.
So I'm sorry, I missed you. You were cut out in the beginning. So was the general answer? But I understood. I heard the argument, but was the general answer that you think for? I just didn't hear your conclusion, which I think you started off with.
Oh,
Is
well,
the
too bad. It was the only brilliant thing I said tonight, and too bad it cut out. Oh man, timing is bad.
So did you say that you think agents are required in order for square circles not to exist, or would they not exist even if there were no agents?
The concept of denying square circles requires an agent. But what an agent is doing is acknowledging that such a thing can't exist because it's logically impossible, which necessitates the impossibility due to the laws of logic, which must be in place in order for the denial to be there. So even a denial of square circles requires logic and recognition of identity. And so to even say it by itself is meaningless. You know, no square circles is meaningless apart from a broader context. It seems to me to carry over, and moral anti-realism is meaningless outside of a broader context, without a broader context, which is why I'm just trying to find out what the preconditions are for moral anti-realism as a possible truth proposition. So no Trinitarian God. I would think universals are necessary, actions are necessary, right?
No. So I think your analogy of square circles was actually a good one, and the way you described it was perfect. You said for the concept that it doesn't exist to exist, agents are required, but for it not to be a possibility in the world is independent of agents, right? Meaning the fact that it can't exist is independent of agents. For the concept that it can't exist is dependent on agents. And I think the moral anti-realist has a similar view about moral oughts. That what an ought is inherently defined by some other uh, agent's preference, not by some abstract existence of an ought.
Okay. Does the agent need to be sentient?
I'm not sure. What's the question? Does it need to be sentient for what?
Well, that's a good question. Let me be sure what I'm asking now. In the preconditions for moral anti-realism, that which must be in place in order for the proposition to have any validity, you've said, no Trinitarian God, which makes sense from that perspective. I would say universals, by which you could even have a conversation about what it is and truth propositions and things like that. And actions, we talked about. An action. It's not a rock sitting by itself. That's not moral. Not moral. Morals, it certainly seems to be the case, requires an agent, at least a sentient agent. Would you agree?
So I think if I'm understanding you correctly, I would say that a world with just rocks would be a world where there are no objective oughts as well, though. So I don't think I would say you require agents to reject the idea that there are some kind of objective oughts independent of humans or independent of sentient beings. I think what the moral realist view is that all these oughts require agents to begin with and are relativized to agents. So without agents, meaning oughts are dependent on agents and are defined relative to agents and are not defined in the way that you might want to define them, maybe relative to a god, um, right? I mean, in some ways, it's the religious view is not that different than the moral anti-realist view, right? It really the main difference is that God doesn't exist.
Oh, I'm going to leave that one alone for now.
No, no,
So,
I'm not making the claim that God doesn't exist. I'm saying the dependency, meaning if I think it all comes down to the existence of the Trinitarian God. That's the only condition you need. And I think you would actually, I believe you would agree, actually, right, that if there was no Trinitarian God, there would be no moral oughts. So I think we actually probably have this. I think we actually have the same view, except for our belief in the existence of the Trinitarian God, and everything follows from that.
let me see if I can repeat what you just said. So I'm assuming you're an atheist. You haven't stated it. And are you a moral anti-realist?
Yeah.
So you're a moral anti-realist, and you're saying that in order for the proposition of moral anti-realism to be true, no Trinitarian God, no universals, no agents, no actions, no intentions. I throw that one at the end. We haven't even talked about that, but I would assume also no intentions.
No, I think there's a
Am I right?
misunderstanding. No, no, I said almost the opposite. I said the rest of those things are irrelevant. Really, all it rests on is if there's a Trinitarian God, then there are moral truths, and if there isn't, there aren't.
Agreed.
The rest is irrelevant.
No, I don't. Well, what I'm doing, so since we only have two positions, I want to see if your position is coherent.
Sure.
So that's what I want to know, because your position, I rewrote a bit of a sentence here. What are the preconditions for the concept of moral anti-realism to be a true proposition? I don't know if that's rightly stated. You could correct me if there's a better way to say it, but you see what I'm saying?
Well, I was actually mimicking you. I think you said it probably more eloquently than I did when you were talking about square triangles. You distinguished between the idea of square triangles not existing and for the concept of square triangles for us to be aware that it doesn't exist or something like that. You made some distinction, one dependent on sentient beings and the other did not.
Yes, I remember. So I'm going to change this back. For the condition of moral anti-realism, preconditions for moral anti-realism to be true. You'd say it, well, let me ask you, would you say moral anti-realism is a true proposition? A truth proposition?
So the moral anti-realism is making a claim that there are no objective oughts in the world, and I believe that is a correct claim. Did I answer your question? Is that
A positive claim, then.
I'm not familiar.
Therefore,
I'm not really familiar with the distinction between positive and non-positive claims.
it's an assertion, right? You're claiming, it's an action that you're performing in a claim, right?
I guess I'm not sure I understand the implications of it. I'm happy to say yes for now, but I'd have to think about what that means.
It's fine.
I'm saying
I'll just
that a
write,
certain, yeah, I'm saying that there are people, meaning if I phrased it this way, would it still be a positive claim? There are those that claim the existence of these objective oughts, and I don't agree. Is that still a positive claim?
I'm wondering if the corollary is true in that case.
What the
Um,
reason that he's saying he doesn't understand there being a distinction between positive and negative claim is because you could phrase it both ways, right? Like you could say moral anti-realism is true, or you could say it's not the case that moral realism is true. Those are the same. That's why you could phrase it in terms of negation, and it doesn't really change anything. I think that's why he's saying the thing about positive or negative claims. Am I accurately characterizing?
Well, that and that I'm not actually that well versed in, the concept of positive and negative claims and what's the meaningful distinction. So I don't
Right.
really know. Yeah.
um, so moral anti-realism is the proposition that there are no objective moral oughts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but as Josh
So there
said,
would be,
oh, sorry, go on.
wouldn't that mean that there's no universals? That so an ought is applicable to more than one person, so they don't exist.
Are you saying if moral facts don't exist, no other facts could exist?
No, I'm trying to understand to get the claim down. Um, moral. Okay, let's hit here. Define the claim that there are no objective universal oughts. How to word this? I don't. That are properties of the world. That's just not a very satisfying way to say that. Doesn't seem I'm trying to get at.
Well, can I ask you a question? Are you saying that entailed from saying there are no moral universals, there can be logical universals or mathematical universals? Is that sort of what you're claiming?
The Christian worldview, that's correct, because all truth values are related to God's moral character, who's the revelator of all truth, and therefore all truths have moral value from the Christian Trinitarian perspective. But I'm looking at your perspective and trying to do an internal critique. First of all, I got to understand it.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think that's how my truth. Well, obviously, you know that that's not how I take something to be true or not true. So, but I don't think my truth determination, or whatever the word would be, would depend on the existence or lack of existence of moral truths.
Well, isn't it the claim that there aren't moral truths? Isn't it a positive claim that such things don't exist?
It's not a claim that any universal doesn't exist. It's a claim that moral universals don't exist. I don't
Claim
see why.
that more. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to rephrase. I don't see why it follows that if moral universals don't exist, then no other universals could exist.
Oh no, I don't. I'm not getting there yet. um, from the Christian perspective, I could connect the dots, but I'm working from inside yours. So the claim that moral universals do not exist is moral anti-realism, right?
Yeah.
Could I add to that then the claim that moral universals? Crap! I hate it when I do that. Got a thought, and then I claim that
There's no
my
rush.
cat.
Take your time.
Yeah, my cat meowed behind me. He doesn't come up here. No, there's a reason. So I got distracted. The claim that moral universals do not exist is also the claim that there are no moral obligations, no moral universal obligations, right?
I think oughts and obligations would be synonymous. Yeah.
If there's no moral obligations, then the moral obligations relate to people, sentient beings.
There's different interpretations that you can have about what we mean when we say you're obliged to do something. But yeah,
True.
meaning there's different views. Some would be that you're making an error. Some would be that you're. I'm happy to share my views on it, but I'm not sure that it's relevant really. But they would all. Yeah, I would say there would be no moral claims without sentient beings.
Yeah, sentient beings are
Will there
persons.
be?
Yeah, and there are different kinds of obligations and oughts. Moral ought, mathematical ought, logical ought, wash the dishes ought, or my wife will give me the look ought. There's all kinds. So we're talking here the claim that moral universal obligations do not exist, right?
Correct.
Then isn't that a universal truth principle that you're asserting?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the difference between universal truth and truth, but it's but again, yeah, I don't think there's a contradiction with saying universals exist, but moral universals don't exist.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm just working out the narrow band of what you're saying here. Then it implies that uh, that a universal truth. I got to write this better. A universal truth principle parenthesis, that there are no moral universal obligations, MUOs, I'm going to put for short. So you're saying that's a universal truth. Then how do you justify that as being true?
I mean, that's what this conversation is, right? Is when you say justify, we have dialogue and we analyze like any other truth.
But aren't you asserting a universal truth principle? That means
Is
then
there?
that
You have, oh, sorry,
that's all
go
right.
on.
You're saying that there's a universal truth principle. Doesn't that imply you have to have a great deal of knowledge to know that these things don't exist anywhere at all times?
You're saying that the awareness of its existence or not depends on some kind of, you know, empirical type of knowing. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Not really, but it's a good question. I'm going to say, let's see, how do you justify that the uh, moral universal obligations don't exist anywhere in all time as they relate to all people?
Well, again, I don't think that
It's
the
going to
the
be
view is
it's
depend.
going to be kind of like if you were to say there are no pink teapots anywhere, right? Like he's sort of asking how is it that you could know something like that without sort of scanning. You'd have to sort of have access to every space.
Yeah, so that would be like what I would call an empirical type of claim, right? Meaning I know it doesn't exist because I haven't seen it empirically.
Well, you have to say it logically then, because we both agree. It's not fair for me to say, hey, I want you to go everywhere all the time right now. Go check it out. That's ridiculous. So the only thing left to us is a logical justification. Otherwise, your position is held irrationally. You're not obviously you're not an irrational person. So there has to be a reason that you're holding to the position that there are it's universally true that there are no moral universal obligations.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit, um, and I'm not sure if it's a logical contradiction is the right, and I'm trying to think about whether it's that I see it as a logical contradiction or there's some other third category which is neither empirical nor logical contradiction. But I think it does, like, meaning I think it doesn't refer. It's a little closer to the present king of France, right?
Yeah,
So I don't know if we would call that a logical contradiction. Um, uh, but
present king of France is just a non-reality, but you're saying it is the case, present reality, that there are no moral universal obligations. That
yeah, but
universal moral
what I mean
obligation.
is the present king of France is bold, right? It's not that I reject that because I'm positive that the present king of France is not bold, right? And it's something similar to that when I say I don't believe in moral oughts, right? I don't think it refers to anything, meaning I think when you're speaking, you're making an error or confusing um, your preferences or desires of specific kind, right, for something that could exist independent of those desires. And I'm saying I don't understand, at least, right? And maybe it's a lack of intelligence on my part or just training. Um, I don't understand what it could mean for there to be a moral ought independent of an agent.
Yeah, I think it's possible. But I was asking if you have a position you're holding to, it's not based on empirical senses, because that's just not possible. Then other options must be a foundation for why you hold to it. Otherwise, it's arbitrary. We
So
wouldn't want to say it's
I think
arbitrary.
well, so I
Go
think
ahead.
what I'm saying is kind of something like it's not possible. I don't see how it's possible. I wouldn't say I can't be convinced otherwise, but I don't see how it's possible that an ought could exist in the world independent of an agent. It seems to entail an agent, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I think Jack, for example, used to have my view and has been convinced otherwise. I have not come to the same light. Maybe you can convince me, Matt.
I don't know.
But it
I'm
seems,
just
but I
putting
think
my
you're
notes
actually
together.
closer to my view than Jack's, because you also think it depends on an agent.
Yeah, I do. I believe it's dependent on agent, the true living God. Yep,
Oh,
who's a necessary precondition. Yeah, I say he's a necessary precondition for all intelligibility. That's another discussion.
okay, so it might be different. So wait, just so I know, in the under the Christian worldview, is God considered an agent?
It Well, an agent of actions. He's the initiator of all of. He's the ultimate cause of all things, not the efficient cause of all things. Though I'm not sure I understood your question. Sorry.
No. I thought you were objecting to my use of the word agent to refer to God. So I wasn't sure if I wasn't sure if there was a under the Christian view, people don't refer to God as an agent, or they do.
Generally, my circles they don't, but that doesn't mean it's not an accurate description when we're talking about it as a doer. You know, that's fine.
But am I correct to say so because this was the phrase I wanted to be able to say. I think both Matt and I actually, Jack does not have this view. I think both Matt and I actually do think, right, that it's relativized. There needs to be some agent to for objective morality to exist. A specific kind of agent. I would say
Yep,
not any
I would
agent,
agree.
right? Meaning, right. So it's the main. So I don't think you need me to give you the argument because you actually have the view that I do, right? The main difference between your view and mine is whether we believe in the existence of the Trinitarian God. Because you said yourself, right? If someone was able to prove to you that the Trinitarian God doesn't exist, I assume you would believe that moral realism was incorrect, right?
No,
So I
if
think
I think you misspoke it, but I'm in agreement with you. If there is no Trinitarian God, then I would probably be a moral anti-realist. That there are no universal moral obligations or truth facts.
yeah. So I'm saying so you don't even need me to give you an argument because I think we know that the crux of our different worldviews is just our belief in the existence of that God. You, like you would be in the same position as me if you shared my belief in the existence of the Trinitarian God. So I mean, I would just be telling you things you know if I tried to walk you through why, because you yourself intuit that if you rejected the idea of a Trinitarian God, you'd be a moral anti-realist. Jack, on the other hand, I think does reject the idea of a Trinitarian God, but is a moral realist. So he has a unique view compared to the two of us. Two of us actually seem to agree, other than the existence of a Trinitarian God.
Well, I would think.
And this
Uh,
this this
I
is
would
what
say.
Philip would call we agreed all along.
Yeah, I would say that ultimately, if you reject the Trinitarian God, you have no basis for rationality at all. And I don't have time to unpack that right now. But you know what? My daughter's leaving for tomorrow, and I'm up here for a little bit, taking notes, relaxing, playing. Now I'm talking to you, which I'm really enjoying. But now I'm starting to feel guilty. I need to be out there helping my daughter.
Sure, no,
She's going to be taking off tomorrow. I know you won't
absolutely,
mind because
no, of
you're
course not.
actually
No,
cool. You're a cool guy to talk to. Who am I talking to? I wasn't paying attention to the
my name is Yaniv. If you follow me, I don't come on often, but I come
Yaniv.
on. Yeah, I come on every once in a while. I'd be happy to speak again.
What's your, if I can ask, Yaniv is an interesting name. Is it, what is it?
Israeli.
Really?
Yeah,
Cool. You speak Hebrew?
I do. Yeah, yeah. I was born there.
Oh,
And,
He
okay, I'm
also
kind of
bombs
envious.
Palestinians, just to be clear.
Oh,
no,
that's
I've lived here. I've
typical
lived.
Zionist.
I've lived here most of my life. So
Yeah, I'll be going to Israel next year. We're doing a trip and stuff like that. So I'm
well, I
looking
can
forward
make
to
I
go
can
back.
make some good recommendations if you'd like.
You support
Yeah.
Well,
Palestine?
it's a tour. I've been into Palestine before and went to Bethlehem and Masada and all that. It's just awesome. But
No, I meant
I think you're
you.
very privileged to live there.
No, I live in the U.S., but
No,
I
I
was
meant
born
do you
there.
support
Oh,
Palestine?
you had me going,
Wait, is that Jonathan
man.
who keeps like bird dogging?
I don't know what that means. Look, I'm going to get going. I'll take a good opportunity to go. I got my notes here. I'm going to go through them a little bit and see if I can organize them a little bit better. But I wrote a full page of notes
Sure,
from what
sure.
we were
We'd be
talking
happy
about.
to continue.
Yeah,
Although we might be in
uh,
agreement.
we are, but By the impossibility of the contrary, I'd say your position is not justifiable. And of course, we can talk about that sometime.
Sure.
Anyway, I do have
Be
to get
happy
going.
to.
See how my I'm starting to feel guilty. I'm not down there with her.
No. You should go be with your family. There's always time to continue
Yeah, have a
this.
great night, Matt.
Okay, you too. Talk to you guys later. Thanks.
Love you. Bye.
Here, Matt.